discussion about the effectiveness of the U.S. blockade. Lots of reports coming out on social media and in the mainstream media talking about ships slipping past the United States and whether or not the U.S. blockade is being effective. We're going to break that down for you today and let you judge for yourself how effective the United States is in preventing Iranian vessels from sailing from their ports to other ports around the world. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So we got a couple of examples of the U.S. enforcing the blockade. Probably the one that grabbed everybody's attention was the container ship Tuska. So we had a briefing on Friday from Secretary Hegseth and General Kane. And General Kane, as usual, gave us more information on the event. In particularly, he talked about the fact that there were other steps besides shooting into the vessel, which we thought was going to be the case. There were warnings fired at Tuska, shots across the bow, 5 of them, and then they fired basically inert shots, basically solid shots into the engine space of the Tuska, so not explosive shells, but shells that are designed to just pop a hole in the side of the ship. And the U.S. has taken control. These images posted by U.S. Central Command show the motor vessel Tuska along with other vessels. That's an LPD right there with the Tuska. You can see it looks like an Arleigh Burke class destroyer maybe in the background there. Not sure from which deck they're taking this image from. So this is from the deck of a military Sealift Command Expeditionary Support Base in ESB, either the USS John Canley or the Miguel Keith. This is the motor tanker Tiffany. Now this is not a Iranian tanker, but a foreign flag tanker. Specifically, this tanker has a false registry. And the fact that it was flying a false flag gives the United States the authorization, along with any other Navy on the planet, to board the vessel. The ship was also under an OFAC sanction, and therefore they decided to execute the takedown. You'll notice in the background there the ESB alongside. The ESB is actually a modified tanker, just with the midsection missing and a flight deck stuck on top of it and a well deck or main deck where they can launch boats from. The other vessel grabbed was this one, the Majestic X, another foreign flag tanker with a false registry. Here you see the crews fast roping on board. Now there will be U.S. Coast Guard personnel with them. You can see the Expeditionary Support Base in the background, and this will be conducted in the seizure very similar to what we saw with the Venezuelan tankers, where the Coast Guard enforces a right to search the vessel since it's a stateless vessel, and then because of a Department of Justice warrant against the ships are seized. So I'm going to hop over here to marine traffic. These are the tracks of the 3 ships. Tuska is the green line here. We're going to show you where she is. She's up here in the Gulf of Oman and northern Arabian Sea. But first I want to show you the the Tiffany and what is shown here as Phoenix, but that is the Majestic X. You'll see where the ships were taken down here about halfway between Sri Lanka and the Malacca Straits. The ships were heading here for Singapore. So this is actually in the Indo-Pacific area of control. So that's why I think the ESB was the Miguel Keith, because she is attached to the Pacific Fleet. Notice the ships are heading on a southwesterly heading. That seems to be taking them down here to Diego Garcia. As I mentioned to you before, Diego Garcia is one of those advanced bases the U.S. have been using. Did a whole video on logistics recently with that. So here is Tuska. Last position we have for her is 19 April. But the images I showed you before had steam coming up out of her, or smoke coming out. We always say steam on ships, even though it's not steam ships anymore. They're diesels. Had the ship underway, so obviously the engine room was not disabled as we had smoke coming from it. Not sure where she is right now, whether she's being towed or sailed into another port. Then over the last 24 hours, we get these images posted by Central Command showing destroyers with intercepted tankers. Can't make out who this is with them right there. So this image was posted yesterday on Central Command. This is the USS Rafael Perlata DDG 115. What's, according to the quote here, enforcing the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports. Fortunately, our buddies over at Tanker Trackers had a better look at this tanker and identified her as the NITC Herbie. IMO number 9362059. Now, she was heading from the Riau Archipelago, which is an area off the eastern coast of Malaysia and Singapore, where she had transferred 2 million barrels of Iranian crude oil via ship-to-ship transfer. Now, she last pinged on AIS on April 12th off the southwest coast of India. She was heading back toward Iran. It takes about a week to reach Iran from there. This took twice as long due to the blockade, but as you can see, she was intercepted by the Peralta. The Herbie here is obviously empty, light loaded. You can see how high up she is. But this is an indication that the U.S. is capturing or diverting ships on the way into the blockade. They're preventing empty ships from getting into Iranian waters to load. So I'll take you here over to Tanker Trackers on X. Their feed is a must follow. I mean, if you want to know anything about the blockade, really need to follow them. There's a couple of key ones to follow, but definitely one. So they posted this 6 hours ago. 4 empty Iranian oil tankers attempting to re-enter Iran have been identified in the EEZ, that's the exclusive economic zone of Pakistan. One of the things we think is happening is Iranian ships are trying to run in the territorial waters of Pakistan and India into Iranian waters. The U.S. is not going to violate Pakistan, Indian territorial waters without their permission. Then you get this post, which is really interesting. There were 3 very large crude carriers loading crude oil at Karg Island yesterday, April 24th. That is 6 million barrels. Based on their movements, we believe that 2 of these VLCCs are Iranian flagged, while the third is a freelance. And this comes from the Copernicus Sentinel-1 satellite. Then on April 23rd, we get this post. Although it's not their latest locations, these are the latest satellite imagery sightings we have of Iranian flag tankers carrying crude oil. The U.S. Navy went down to the Indian Ocean to redirect a couple of them back to Iran, and you can see those locations here. And then on April 23rd, this was interesting to say the least. To prepare for the possibility of running out of oil storage at Karg Island, Iran has brought Nasha, IMO number 9079107, out of retirement. She's a 30-year-old VLCC that's been anchored empty for the past few years, currently spending 4 days on a trip that should take 1.5 to 2 days. She is being towed. And if you're asking why they're doing that, they're worried that if there's not enough oil tankers to fill, they're going to have to fill shore tanks. If they fill up shore tanks and there's nowhere else to stick the oil, they've got to shut the wells. And when you cap off a well, what you do is damage the well. You got to keep that pressure coming out. It's like a garden hose, except the pressure on the garden hose continually increases and increases until it's eventually going to explode. That's the danger, and that's what's happening right now. All right, so that gives you a little bit of an indication of what's happening, but that's not even down to the granular level I want to go to. Let's go to a post that was put out there by a good friend of the show, Michelle Weiss-Bachmann, over at Windward. Now, if you don't know Windward AI, they have this dashboard that is up for you to take a look at. It is an excellent source to go get your quick information needs if you need it. For example, it has your key metrics, how many vessels are in the Gulf, Hormuz inbound crossings, Hormuz outbound crossings, dark activity events, and vessels attacked. It also includes a daily intelligence summary. It has vessel movements so that you can track them. Also has a great breakdown of the fleet that's behind the Persian Gulf. Now, again, they're looking at deep draft ocean-going fleet, not all the smaller vessels that are in there. So, for example, here you see 766 vessels in the Gulf. 81 of them are crude tankers. 50 are container ships, 39 liquefied natural gas and LPG tankers. The most common ships are Panamanian, Marshall Islands, Comoros, Liberia, UAE, and then Iranian vessels. The 5 U.S. ships don't even make this list. And then they have analytics for the crossing and destinations. Then they have a MEOC, a Maritime Intelligence Operations Center, along with vessel movements and suspected vessels, and a recap here of all the past attacks. Excellent site to go to. I would also recommend this. This is the United Against Nuclear Iran. They do a great shipping update. This is on their blog. And every day, Charlie Brown and Gemina Shelley are updating this largely. so that you can get a great snapshot of what is happening. So for example, here you can get information on the U.S. blockade. For example, on April 24th, U.S. CENTCOM posted that U.S. forces have directed 34 vessels to turn around and return to an Iranian port since the commencement of the attack. They have a great breakdown here on the status of the Strait of Hormuz, talking about the two MSC ships seized by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. They, of course, follow the transits through the Strait of Hormuz, and then they're identifying at least 21 tankers laden with Iranian oil inside the Persian Gulf. And then an examination of the port of Chabahar, which is out in the Gulf of Oman near the Pakistan border. At least 9 Iranian flag tankers laden with Iranian oil are sitting in that area. And then since the outbreak of the conflict, the UANI has tracked at least 50 Iranian oil loadings, 26 of which are originated from Karg. These shipments represent approximately 60 million barrels of Iranian oil, estimated revenue of $5 billion for the IRGC. Since the start of the conflict, UANI has observed at least 52 Ghost Fleet tankers laden with Iranian oil. These are dark fleet tankers. For example, they look at 2 vessels right here, the Felicity and the Dirya, both of them in the Gulf of Kutch in India. The Felicity left on April 18th, reporting empty, then turned off its AIS. Satellite imagery confirmed that Felicia is heading back toward the Persian Gulf, with the tanker passing the U.S. blockade between April 20th and 21st. The Dirya departed southward on April 19th with a deep draft of 20 meters, then turned off its AIS. Dirya was later observed in satellite imaging traveling southbound along the Indian coastline on April 22nd. Reports suggest the vessel was interdicted by U.S. naval forces, but that is yet to be confirmed. So what they're waiting for is ships to hit that area of open water east of Sri Lanka, heading to the Malacca Strait, where they nabbed those 2 previous tankers. The other area to be aware of is this anchorage we were talking about here, just east of Malaysia. According to UANI, at least 29 Iran flag tankers have reached the Southeast Asian waters bound for the eastern outer port limits anchorage off Johor. At least 31 Iran flag tankers have been returning and reporting empty to Iran from the Malaysian EOPL. From February 28th, the start of the conflict, to today, UANI has recorded 113 tankers laden with Iranian oil in that eastern anchorage, a Ghost Fleet hotspot approximately 70 kilometers off the Malaysian coast. On April 24th, 21 tankers listed on the UANI's Ghost Armada were anchored or loitering in that area with their AIS signals active. Give you an idea what we're talking about. Here's the Malaysian Peninsula, Singapore right here. You can see ships coming through the Malacca Strait, through the Singapore Strait, up into the East China Sea. And then right here, this massive anchorage, red dots represent tankers. You can see just the sea of them here. So this is Michelle's LinkedIn page. Again, a must follow. Used to be over at Lloyd's List, now with Windward AI. I had a great chance to hang around with the crew from Windward AI at the Sea Air Space Expo up at National Harbor this past week. Ami, Grace, it was great to catch up with them and get a chance to meet and talk with them. So let's take a look at Michelle's thread. So how effective has the U.S. blockade been on Iran trading tankers? The disruption across the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea is widespread. Chaotic AIS trails tankers not under command. As always, the picture tells the story. Firstly, here's 11 sanctioned tankers and their progress, or lack thereof, in the Arabian Sea. Now, all these tankers are sanctioned tankers, but we're going to break them down here a little bit, as Michelle does in her post. So, falsely flagged Emil, IMO 9308778, thought it would hug the India's coast to avoid the blockade. Its trajectory and high speed in past hours suggest it's under surveillance. So here is Emil on marine traffic. You'll see she is off the coast of India, heading up toward Pakistan at this time. She's heading about 12 knots on a northwesterly course. The ship is Curacao flagged, about 22 years old, 48,000 ton tanker. So based on what Michelle is talking about, this ship is trying to get back into the Persian Gulf to load. Next, we have the LPG carrier Crave, IMO 9045807. Now, this ship is falsely flagged in Mali and a provider of LPG to the Houthis last year from Iran. And they must have thought they can get away with it. The tanker transited after the blockade was imposed on April 13th, went dark, and then popped up off India's coastline and went dark again. She is back right now. So here is Crave off the coast of India, very close inshore. So obviously using that protection of the Indian coastline here. Just take a moment too and notice the number of ships in the northern Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea area right here. Gives you an idea of the amount of traffic that the United States has to be tracking and identifying in this region. Remember, red are tankers, green are cargo ships, and all those other little dots there are fishing boats that are showing AIS, not to mention every other target in the world that is out there. This is a huge mess. Very difficult to track everything at the same time. Then we have this group of 8 U.S. sanctioned tankers, some of which did outbound transits post-blockade, some of which are sailing for an inbound transit, but they appear to have, to use the phrase Michelle uses, kettled into this area. So this is the area here just outside the Strait of Hormuz. They went that northern route through the Iranian toll booth, coming south here into the area of Fujairah, the Gulf of Oman. The U.S. blockade is off to the bottom right here. So here's the track for those 8 ships: the Billy, the Chloe, the Nero, the Hong Yun, the Purdue Stellar, the Mita, the Elcano, and the Unity. And again, what we have here is probably a lot of false information, for example, coming out of Iraq when they're probably coming out of Iran, some of them. But they're all holding here just outside in the Gulf of Oman. And remember that blockade line is right here. So this is where the U.S. is enforcing turning ships around. So while ships can run the Strait of Hormuz, it doesn't mean they're getting out past the blockade. Now, one of the things that Michelle notes is many tankers are now drifting and showing not under the command as they stop sailing for Hormuz. So the Sea Opera, the Elizabeth, the Amak, and the Nora. One of the tankers that Michelle takes note of is this tanker, the Nikki, which is a prime target sailing from Bandar Abbas and now hugging the Iran coastline in the territorial waters. That's that purple line there. Likely the ship will end up in Chabahar, another area where redirected ships have been kettled by CENTCOM. Here's the information on marine traffic. 8-year-old chemical tanker flagged in Iran, capable of carrying about 50,000 tons. She is blasting away on her AIS. She's right here in the port of Chabahar, and again, that is right by the blockade. If we change this chart, this purple line here represents roughly where we believe the blockade line is, and she is sitting there pierside right now. Now, she identified 3 other tankers to keep an eye on. This is the Impalas, the Fuyo, and the Titan. So here are their positions on 24 April. You'll see the routes taken. Titan was over here. The Fuyo was over here by Sri Lanka. And then the Impalas came out of Malaysia, out of Singapore, turned off its AIS. It didn't drive across India. And then popped up. It looks like all of them now are coming into the region. They have run past the American blockade line and are now sitting there roughly inside the Gulf of Oman, possibly getting ready to transit. So here's the information on Titan. Curacao flagged IMO 9293143, 21 years old, 160,000 tons. When you look at these vessels and you run them through compliance checks, what you find out is they're under OFAC sanctions. They have loaded cargo recently, in this case back in March, from Karg Island, and even their ownership is under an OFAC sanction, this one under the United Arab Emirates. Fuyo is a Guinea flag vessel, 23 years old, 107,000 tons. It's coming from Malaysia, and again, you run the compliance on this vessel. You'll notice she's been flagged by OFAC back in 2025, loaded out of Karg Island in 2025, and her ownership has issues under OFAC sanctions. And the last out of 3 there, Impalas, crude oil tanker, 27 years old, flagged out of Sao Tome and Principe. This is an island off the western coast of Africa. If that doesn't ring red flags, I'm not sure what does. Nearly 300,000 tons. And again, if we run compliance on her, you'll see the same thing. She's flagged by OFAC for loading at Carg Island back in February of 2026, along with multiple ones. And her ownerships are also under flag here from OFAC. So Michelle concludes her post with this. After watching how Indo-PACOM, that's the Indo-Pacific Command, chased the Venezuelan tankers that defied blockade in December over to the Indian Ocean, and over her observations over the past 48 hours, well, it should be 72 hours now, the blockade is actually biting hard. Her attention is now being focused to those anchorages off the east coast of Malaysia, whereas many of 80 tankers are at one time deployed in floating storage and doing ship-to-ship transfers. This could be the next pain point. Finally, many of these tankers are falsely flagged and thus stateless and able to be boarded and interdicted. At least 2 tankers of the 34 redirections announced by the Department of War/Defense are subject to civil forfeiture. It appears being falsely flagged is an acute vulnerability for all these tankers. Now, one of the interesting things that's being done here is the U.S. is boarding and seizing stateless tankers, much as they did with the Venezuelan tankers. Yes, they have boarded one Iranian ship, but that seems to have been the example. The rest of them are being turned and herded around toward anchorages. They don't want to seem to attack, board, and get into a direct confrontation with the Iranians. Instead, it is much easier and legal, by the way, to board stateless vessels and take them. And if you want my example of this, this is the one that CENTCOM has just posted today. This is the LPG-7. Yesterday, Motor Vessel 7 was among 19 Shadow Fleet vessels sanctioned by the U.S. Department of Treasury for activities related to transporting billions of dollars worth of Iranian energy, oil, and gas products, including propane and butane, to foreign markets. Earlier today, 7 was intercepted in the Arabian Sea by a U.S. Navy helicopter from the guided missile destroyer USS Pinckney, DDG-91, and the vessel is currently complying with the U.S. military direction to turn back to Iran under escort. U.S. forces continue to enforce U.S. sanctions, fully implement the blockade against ships or entering or departing Iranian ports. 37 vessels have been redirected since the start of the blockade. Take you over to marine traffic again. This is LPG-7, 27 years old, flagged in Panama, which the U.S. has an agreement by which they can board ships. We saw this during the Venezuelan takedowns. Here is 7's track right now, coming out of the Persian Gulf, following that route, hanging off in the Gulf of Oman, holding and hugging the Omani coast, and then eventually bolting out here across. And we can see 7 right now is heading northwest, probably toward Chabahar, and that anchorage there back toward Iranian waters. So I'll let you evaluate the effectiveness of the U.S. blockade. Yes, we have ships loading at Carg Island, 6 million barrels of 3 tankers there. The Iranians are moving a dead tanker up to that area to provide storage. However, what we're seeing is Iranian tankers turned around and herded back into the port of Chabahar. I talked about the other day a series of tankers that were turned around and put back in there by the United States. This is imagery posted by Tanker Trackers on April 23rd. They identified 9 Iranian tankers in Chabahar. There were 5 on April 21st, Hero 2, IMO 936-2073, and Hedi, IMO 921-2888, back in Chabahar after trying to evade the blockade line. Diona 956-9695 has also returned. One of the things that Tanker Trackers has is a database of the satellite imagery of the top of tankers, and using AI and imagery, they're able to positively identify. Every tanker is a little bit different, kind of like a fingerprint, and so you can visually identify by the length, size, configuration of the pipes on deck, the house. There's a whole batch of features that go into this. So again, the United States trying to exert pressure against Iran, get them back to the negotiation table, which has collapsed again today. and try to force Iran into this. The hope here by the United States is that as Iran can't export oil, they're going to face the situation where they're going to have to shut wells down, and that is going to be cataclysmic for the Iranian economy, and the U.S. is hoping to use that leverage against them. Again, this could have been done a little bit early on, in my opinion, but hey, what do we know? We decided to start the blockade late. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you support the page? Well, you can hit that super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Got a lot of comments about this shirt the other day, and I wore it again for you too. This is from Kenny Flowers. This is the Margaritaville collection. So got a pair of these from Kenny Flowers the other day. I think that this one is very timely and festive for talking about a military blockade. So again, try to be as festive as you can in time of war. Until the next episode, Sal, sign off.